I owned an Omega Speedmaster for 12 years up until very recently. There are a lot of really cool things about the Speedmaster that I would say are common knowledge to the seasoned collector, but may seem strange or even a little shocking about one of the most loved chronographs. So here are 10 things you should know about the Speedmaster if you're new to watch collecting. The Speedmaster is famous for its association with space, that first landing on the moon and many space missions since. But the watch, despite what it may seem like, was not designed for NASA. The watch was in fact originally designed as a racing watch, a rival to Hoya and Rolex with its Daytona. A watch designed for race car drivers. In fact, the Speedmaster still has its tachymeter bezel, something not a lot of astronauts need whilst floating around in zero gravity. The legend goes that NASA started seriously looking at the Speedmaster after Wally Schirra wore one during his space flight. That was on the Mercury 8 in October the 3rd, 1962. And on its most famous mission in 1969, the Speedmaster was the only unmodified piece of equipment that the astronauts took to the moon. Despite its very famous association with NASA and the first moon landing, an association Omega is very proud of and should be, one person is noticeably absent from most of Omega's marketing, and that's the commander of Apollo 11. In fact, you'd be hard pressed to find anywhere near the number of pictures of Neil Armstrong as there are of Buzz Aldrin. But why is that? Well, this one is a little bit of conjecture on my part, but I believe it's because Neil Armstrong was not the first person to wear a Speedmaster to walk on the moon. In fact, he didn't wear a Speedmaster to walk on the moon at all. Armstrong's Speedmaster had to be left behind on the Eagle to provide a backup for the mission timer which had malfunctioned. Concerned that they would have nothing to use instead of a critical mission timer if both watches were damaged during the 2-hour and 36-minute moonwalk, Armstrong opted to leave his watch behind. Buzz Aldrin was the first to wear a Speedmaster on the moon and subsequently is in a lot of the Omega marketing. Did you know one of the most famous Speedmasters is lost? One of those iconic moon watches represents one of the biggest horological mysteries ever. The story goes that those iconic watches were the property of the US government. In fact, Neil Armstrong is commonly associated with another watch that you've seen me review on the channel, or at least the modern version of that watch, and that's the Walbrook Skin Diver. On returning the watches to the government, Buzz Aldrin's watch, which is possibly the most iconic Omega in history, was lost in the mail, and to this date, it's never been found. It's one of the biggest mysteries in the watch world, well, now that Paul Newman's Rolex Daytona was discovered. Paul Newman's Daytona fetched $17 million at auction, so who knows what Buzz Aldrin's watch that really went to the moon could fetch. One Omega watch has a nickname that's nothing to do with the way the watch looks or its name. Unlike Rolex watches that have nicknames usually associated with the way they look, like for example the Pepsi, the Hulk, the Smurf, and so on, Speedmasters usually have nicknames based on an abbreviation of their actual names, like FOIS is the first Omega in space, or derived from names Omega gave the watches like Snoopy, Schumacher, Ultraman, and so on. But one very important Omega is nicknamed after another famous astronaut, and that's Ed White. On June the 3rd, 1965, Edward Higgins White II became the first American to walk in space when he ventured outside the Gemini capsule, and on his wrist he wore his own Speedmaster 105003, featuring the caliber 321 movement. The Speedmaster 105003 is now known as the Ed White and has become one of the most sought after vintage Speedmasters amongst the serious watch collectors. Very sadly, Ed White died on January the 27th, 1967 during a fire on a pre-launch testing at Cape Canaveral in Florida. Thankfully, his name and legend lives on as a much-loved nickname of the Speedmaster he made famous. Yes, Speedmasters like the Omegas that went to space have plastic crystals. You may hear it being called Hesalite, plexi, or the many other names it has, but they are all a form of plastic. It's authentic to the originals, but if you're not familiar with its characteristics, you're going to get a shock when you scratch it even with a shirt cuff. It has many benefits like being incredibly strong, and the scratches can be very easily polished out. But yes, it is plastic. Even though Hesselite sounds like a sophisticated type of glass, know what it is and its characteristics, or you may be better off choosing one of the many sapphire models. The Speedmaster is not one watch model like the Rolex Daytona. The name is used for an entire line of watches past, present and future. This includes mechanical, high precision quartz, and even at one time LCD models. In fact, the current lineup, there are over 110 watches in the Speedmaster line, not to mention the almost endless stream of limited editions or limited production models like the new Snoopy. You have the option to buy Speedmasters with moon phases, automatic versions, and my favourite, the grey side of the moon that features a case made entirely of ceramic, and they range wildly in price from $5,000 up to well over $60,000. Did you know the Speedmaster used to be one of the most affordable luxury watches available? Not anymore. The base model climbed from a few $1,000s to $5,000 in no time. A shame, as it used to be one of the best ways to get into Swiss luxury watches with iconic histories, and it was beloved by engineers. Okay, this is one of the last space ones, but it's worth a mention, and it's not to do with the Speedmaster. But did you know you can actually pick up another NASA authorized space watch for less than $100 on eBay? Along with the Speedmaster, the Timex Datalink is a 1990s Timex that happens to be one of the earliest smartwatches that could sync with a computer. So before you shell out thousands on a new Speedmaster because of its association with NASA, maybe check out that Timex first, and of course the iconic G-Shock 5600 range. The Speedmaster contains one of the most technically advanced chronograph movements and one of the least technically advanced ones, by current standards anyway. Most watch companies improve their movements over time. In fact, Omega made a massive leap in movement technology with the coaxial movement. This can be found in famous Speedmasters like the Dark Side of the Moon and the aforementioned Grey Side of the Moon. It's a fantastic movement and one of the most technically advanced mechanical chronographs available. But last year, Omega released one of the very first movements again, and that was the 321 movement. This was the same movement that was used in those space watches, with the exception of some that ran the 861 caliber. Since then, the majority of Speedmaster movements can draw a direct line from the 321, and they were all based on a movement made from a company called Lemania. Okay, I lied about there being no more space ones. The first Speedmasters to go into space, as mentioned in point 1, were not specifically designed for that purpose. The fact that the precision engineering Omega put into those early watches allowed them to withstand the rigours of NASA's vetting process, a real testament to Omega's watchmakers at the time. The story goes, in 1964, NASA engineer James Reagan reached out to the US importers of Longines, Rolex, Hamilton, Omega and several others for quotes and sample timepieces to be tested. This testing took place from October the 21st, 1964 and lasted until March the 1st, 1965, and by all accounts was extreme. The tests involved 6 shocks of 40 Gs, each 11 milliseconds in duration, acceleration from 1 G to 7.3 Gs in 333 seconds, as well as enduring temperatures from 0 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Reagan essentially tried to decimate these timepieces. In the end, only the Speedmaster, specifically the 1003 model, was left standing, much thanks to the flawless performance of the caliber 321, as mentioned in point 9. But did you know there is a line of watches specifically made for space travel, and Omega even sought help from astronauts to design it? This Speedmaster happens to be the most technically advanced Speedmaster of them all. This watch is called the X33. The development of the X33, including putting prototypes in the hands of astronauts, pilots and and directly incorporating their feedback into the final production models of the watch. Testers included members of the Navy Blue Angels Aerobatic Demonstration Squadron, as well as astronauts including Swiss astronaut Claude Nicola. The X-33 has been on countless space flights and is certified by the European Space Agency for all of its missions, and we most recently saw it on the Dragon launch. The distinctive name X-33 is derived from a prototype space plane. The watch can trace its heritage back to the now iconic and possibly most extreme Speedmaster of them all, the Alaskan project, and a largely forgotten digital version of the Seamaster. Before we finish up here, a special mention for new watch collectors is the large amount of aftermarket straps for the Speedmaster. It's one of those watches that looks great on all straps. Everything from NATO, leather, and even tropic straps. One of the best resources I have found for leather straps is Macola over at Man Cave Leather, and if you're wanting to give your watch a really unique and vintage look, check out Uncle Seiko. He has some fantastic aftermarket metal straps for Speedmasters, including my favourite, the Beads of Rice. There were my 10. Let me know if you're a Speedmaster fan and if I missed anything new collectors should know. Appreciate you watching and see you next time on Casual Watch Reviews.